Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Well, we're surrounded here at the Museum of Free Derry by the history of the Troubles, and today marked 50 years since that defining event. British troops deployed on the streets around us to quell violence between the Catholic community and the Royal Ulster Constabulary, as it was then. No one here needs reminding about the years that followed. Many thought those days had long gone after the signing of the Good Friday Agreement. But Brexit, and specifically talk of a hard border, has brought murmurs of division back into the conversation. And there are many who fear a return to violence.
50 years ago today, it was the moment that changed Northern Ireland forever. British forces sent into Derry to help put an end to the riot they called the Battle of the Bogside, the start of a military deployment that would last almost 38 years. It had begun as Protestant marchers, apprentice boys, celebrated an ancient victory, passing by the Catholic Bogside. Against a backdrop of civil rights abuses and discrimination, a riot erupted.
This is Londonderry. This is Londonderry on the day of the Apprentice Boys' March. The police are now a quarter of a mile inside the Bogside area. This here is Harvey Street. They've been moved in here after sustaining for some 2 hours a hail of stones from people on the Bogside side of the barricade.
And for 2 days, the Royal Ulster Constabulary, as it was, and their much feared and armed B Specials lost control.
That's the bottom of Waterloo Street, isn't it?
Terry Wright was one of the apprentice boys. Eamon McCann was a young nationalist.
Well, my first memory of standing sort of at the corner, sort of just along here, and looking down William Street and seeing British soldiers suddenly appearing, or it seemed something to me anyway, and unrolling sort of concertina of barbed wire and putting it across the mouth of William Street, i.e. across the mouth of between the Bogside and the commercial heart of the city.
So I was a member of the Apprentice Boys at the time and was on the parade when the stone throwing kicked off, and it was only later in the evening when I came down and was on the other side of the barricade observing what was happening here. But I mean, standing here today, I suppose now I am getting a sense of sorrow.
Today it is a no-deal Brexit they both fear, and the possibility it could take this city back to violence.
I don't see how you could have a no-deal Brexit without there being a customs installations. There must be, if it's two separate jurisdictions and two separate customs arrangements, two separate standards, sets of standards. There'll have to be some sort of border, and with all the uncertainty ahead, one of the few things that I feel certain about is that if anybody erects a customs border there, or there, within 3 miles, people are going to shoot at them. Now, people who shoot at them will not represent a majority of the people in this area or anywhere else. How many people does it take to organise and carry out an ambush? I mean, 3, 4, 6, that's all it takes. Once the installations are shot at, they'll have to be defended. You'll have to bring soldiers in to defend it. They'll be shot at. And thus you can see there a possible step-by-step return to violence.
I think there are lessons to be drawn from what happened here, because the majority did not provide a safety valve for the minority view and did not listen to the minority and listen to their concerns. And you could argue that some of the same thing is happening with Brexit, that the majority is just claiming a mandate and pushing it through. So it has implications for Ireland. There is the potential that people want to exploit it for violence.
In the city that spawned the Undertones, there's still a thriving punk scene, including touts. But anyone enjoying teenage kicks here was born after the Good Friday Agreement, like Jason, the drummer.
So when you look at Westminster and Westminster politicians...
Well, I think it's their ignorance. Any situation that will be created where there is violence will be created by ignorance in Westminster. That's the only thing.
So in a way, do you think there is the same discrimination going on now that there was 50 years ago?
Discrimination maybe being the wrong word, because I don't want to make it sound like I'm a second-class citizen, which definitely someone from the Bogside might have been treated as in the past, but I don't feel that now, but I do feel that I'm not cared about and I'm not being accurately represented and I'm not being looked after, and no one is fighting my corner on the table. Not the Secretary for Northern Ireland, definitely not Boris Johnson, not the DUP, and not Sinn Féin. No one's looking after me and my generation.
And that failure of political leadership as no deal approaches is one the older generation feel too.
The man who's now Prime Minister suggested that the border in Ireland was much like the border between Stoke Newington and Islington in London. Why should there be a difficulty here? Now the depth of ignorance. Wow! I mean, it's, some people have little gaps in their knowledge about things. I say that Johnson's knowledge is a little gap in his ignorance. It comes from Eton after all, you know, sort of where the, which is, just smooths out the ignorance of the British ruling class, you know, polishes them up and stands them out into the world to rule lesser breeds.
A little bit of prejudice coming out there, maybe.
Well, joining me now is Sinn Féin's Alicia McCallion, the MP for this city. The SDLP leader, Colin Eastwood, is also with us. And from the Irish Parliament, the TD for Donegal, just over the border 3 miles from here, Charlie McGonagall. And from Belfast, we have the Ulster Unionist leader, Robin Swan. Mr. Swan, let me just begin with you. In this argument between Philip Hammond and Boris Johnson, whose side are you on?
Well, I'd actually be closer aligned to Philip Hammond, and when we met Boris Johnson just over a week ago and made it very clear as the Ulster Unionist Party's position has been very clear that we don't see a no-deal exit being good for the UK or Northern Ireland specifically because of some of the difficulties that were expressed by your earlier commentators.
And do you fear a return to violence?
And I think that's where we have to be very careful in language in regards to the return to violence. Because if we start talking up the possibility of a return to violence, especially here in Northern Ireland, it gives legitimacy, or it could give an excuse for those who are intent on violence, no matter what the reason or no matter what the rationale. So I think it's imperative that actually politicians take a responsible step and actually try to de-escalate the language around the potential of violence that's going to be related solely to Brexit. We're in a difficult political situation here in Northern Ireland, and I don't think as politicians that we should be given any excuse, credence or cover to those who are actually intent on violence, no matter what the reason.
Alicia McCallion, while this argument goes on in London and they use this sort of militaristic language of betrayal and collaboration, what does no-deal Brexit really mean here when you're so close to the border?
There's a word that's used very often when you describe what the potential of Brexit would have on a city and a region such as this, and it's catastrophe. And that's not exaggeration. We are already on the periphery as a border region here, and we suffer from deprivations and years of neglect. So any type of border in our region will have devastating impact.
I mean, we spoke to a variety of people on both sides of the divide here who have all talked about their fears of a return to violence. Is that something you share?
Well, I mean, the conditions that brought about the violence that started the last phase of the conflict here in the streets of Derry aren't the same. I think we need to be clear in that. Now, there are issues, there's no doubt that there is issues, but the issues that faced the people in 1969, issues like gerrymandering, severe economic deprivation, aren't the same as they are today. And what we do have today is a pathway, a peaceful pathway underpinned in the Good Friday Agreement for those who aspire towards a new and agreed Ireland to work towards.
I mean, everything is economic, isn't it, Colin Eastwood? I mean, what would the economic impact here be? And what do you think the possible follow-on from that?
It would be absolutely devastating for the people of the city, for the people across the border. It will totally wreck any economy that we have. This place is already in the doldrums.
I mean, this is not a rich area, is it?
This has got the highest levels of economic inactivity and unemployment of anywhere on these islands. We are already very, very badly served in terms of our economic opportunities. The idea of putting an economic border, in whatever way that would look, an economic border a mile from here, would be absolutely devastating for the people of this city, and it cannot be allowed to happen.
But the Brexiteers are clear that the backstop is dead.
The Brexiteers
as far as they are concerned.
But you see, the Brexiteers don't care about people here. They clearly have illustrated that they don't care. We have a Prime Minister who doesn't understand the issues here, and they need to start listening, because the European Union are the only people who seem to be listening to us. They're standing four square behind the citizens here. Never mind all of the politics, they're standing behind the citizens here who don't want to leave the European Union, and we definitely don't want to leave the trading relationship, which would create some kind of a border on this island.
But in practical terms then, on November the 1st, if Brexit happens and it's a no-deal Brexit, OK, fine, there's no immediate return to border infrastructure. But what happens in time?
Well, I think our economy will grind to a halt. I think we are very dependent on export. We're very dependent on all of the opportunities that we see across the European Union. But we're also dependent on the progress that we've made, the opportunities that we've had to create friendships and relationships and businesses right across this island. And we're not about to give that up. So I think what's going to be very clear, whatever happens on the 1st of November, Northern Ireland will be remaining in the customs union and single market. It's up to Britain whether or not they want to do that as well. It would be economically crazy, in my view, for them to leave.
But they won't.
Well, let's see what they do, because it would be economically crazy, in my view, for people to allow that to happen to them, but won't be happening to us because people here won't allow it to happen.
Charlie McConalogue, I mean, what will happen in practical terms when both sides say there'll be no return to a hard border, there will be no infrastructure set up to shoot at or to attack? How will you enforce customs?
Well, of course, growing up here, we had customs posts, we had military posts on the border, and we had lots of troubles as a result of the strife that created as well. The European Union and the integration of the European Union allowed the removal of barriers north and south, which actually provided the environment within which the Good Friday Agreement could be agreed. So if we actually saw a hard border on the 1st of November now, it would undo a lot of that actually integrated nature of trade and relationships between Northern Ireland and the Republic. And we see that particularly, for example, in agriculture, where we have an all-island animal health and all-island agri-food sector, with 1/3, for example, of the milk which is produced here in Northern Ireland processed in the Republic, and likewise a lot of livestock processed in the north which is produced in the south, and that's across all other sectors of trade as well. So for a hard border to happen would put all that at stake and would undoubtedly lead to a massive economic shock, apart from the other social consequences that it would have.
Precisely, and a lot of the pro-Brexit MPs in Westminster think that means you, Ireland, will buckle in the end, and you will change your tune and you will accept whatever it is that they're putting to you.
I would make the point here, and I think there was a lot of merit in what Philip Hammond said, but I think we have to remember back to what the Brexiteers said in advance of the referendum as well, no more so than the current Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, who said he would never see any Prime Minister bring the UK out of the single market. I remember the then Secretary of State, Theresa Villiers, coming to Northern Ireland during that campaign and reassuring everyone that under no circumstances would a Brexit vote deliver a hard border in the island of Ireland. Yet we see them now plying a very different message and taking a very different approach, one that actually isn't in tune with the democratic mandate that they would have sought at the time, and one that would be tremendously and immensely and irrevocably damaging to Northern Ireland and to the border areas that are around it.
Let me just go back to Robin Swan, who's been listening in Belfast. I mean, do you agree with the impression we're getting here that actually, if no deal goes ahead, we are looking at the customs border in the Irish Sea?
Well, look, and I think that's why, as a unionist party, we actually opposed the backstop that was included within the withdrawal agreement, because in our opinion, and in the opinion of David Trimble, an architect of the Belfast Agreement, the backstop actually drove a coach and horses through the principle of consent, and that principle of consent is the building block of the Belfast Agreement that allows Northern Ireland to indicate it as a part of the United Kingdom. So when we go to establishing a border down the middle of the Irish Sea, it actually drives that coach and horses through that principle of consent that sees this Northern Ireland being part of the United Kingdom. And I heard one of the other commentators there talking about the trade relationship that we actually have on these islands. And that is because of the success and actually the outworkings of our own assembly working in Northern Ireland. So, the challenge that comes with Brexit, some of those challenges that are going to face the people here in Northern Ireland can be helped, can be resolved by actually a functioning assembly here in Northern Ireland, something that we don't have and something we haven't had for 2.5 years.
Indeed. Last word, Colm Eastwood. I mean, you were shaking your head at that answer. I mean, bring us back to this question of how much more real the threats of no deal feel when you're sitting here in Derry?
Very real, and people here feel it. They feel it right across the border regions, whether on this side of the border or the other side. Because as Charlie has said already, the Good Friday Agreement was underpinned by our membership, our common membership of the European Union, which allowed us to develop relationships and business right across this island and into the European Union. To put that a threat, to threaten that at all, whether you're British Prime Minister or anybody else, you're threatening an international agreement that has been written and supported by the people of this island, and it's totally and utterly wrong. And the people here will not have the precious progress that we've made threatened by anybody, no matter which street they live on.
Thank you all very much indeed for joining us. So 50 years after the Battle of the Bogside, what do the younger generation make of a possible no-deal Brexit and what it may mean for their futures? I'm joined here by Sarah Canning, whose partner, Lyra McKee, was murdered in April by dissident Republicans, student Tegan Nesbitt and dance teacher Georgina Key McCarter. Sarah Canning, you famously gave a lot of politicians an honest appraisal of what you thought when they came to join you in mourning Lyra. As Boris Johnson accuses people in his own party of being collaborators, what would you say to him?
The extremist language is why we are where we are at this minute in time. You know, we are looking at possible decimation of the union in the face of Brexit. We're looking at massive economic collapse, possibly. To use language like that is just going to whip up the people's anger who believe that it's a good thing. It alienates the people who could be on a side, and it pushes further away the people on the other side. I don't believe extremist language helps anyone.
And how do you feel, 78 days from Brexit, whether it's no deal or deal, how that's going to change your life?
As a person from Northern Ireland, I'm scared. Things here are already massively in upheaval. We're seeing, Brexit benefits some people and doesn't benefit other people. There are people from my background, from a Republican background, who view it as the end of the Union and the start of a united Ireland. There are people from a Unionist background who are fully entrenched in it for whatever reason they have. And there are people from both backgrounds who believe that it's going to be so detrimental to our communities. So for me personally, it's a frightening prospect.
Tegan, you're doing A-levels. Mm-hmm. How is the prospect of Brexit changing how you see your future?
Well, for a girl who once wanted to travel all around the world and go around and see everything she could before university, it's absolutely terrifying. I now have been limited to only wanting to apply for one university in Northern Ireland just because it's safer. It's safer for me, it's safer for my family, because who knows what's going to happen after Brexit, the deal or no deal happens. We could have fees that are absolutely through the roof. And that doesn't just affect people like me, it affects people who are going back to doing education, it affects all of us, really.
Obviously you can still travel.
Yeah.
There will almost certainly be visa-free travel eventually. But where did you want to go to university if you could have gone anywhere?
Initially, I actually wanted to study over in maybe Spain, or I was thinking of going over and doing a modern languages course, but I was put off that totally because I was almost saw as, you can't sit in on an EU conference nowadays. What are you meant to do? Just sit around, just speak Spanish, just around the streets, So I was put off doing a languages degree because of something that I couldn't control or vote in because I was too young.
Georgina Key McCarter, you voted for Brexit.
I did.
What would you say to Tegan?
I just don't want Brexit to be another big negative on Northern Ireland. The politicians can deal with it, it's going to happen one way or another. But we've got so many good things that we need to promote in this country. It's a wonderful place to live. It's got its troubles, but every country has its troubles. It really is a very special to live. It's a very special place to study. We shouldn't have any fear for the future because it really is a wonderful place to be.
So you're in the power of positive thinking, Boris Johnson mindset. Does that apply even if it's no deal?
If it's no deal, it's no deal. This is a wonderful country. This is one of the places that have the most friendliest welcome that you'll ever find. We need to market this place as somewhere where we want people to visit, come and see what we're all about. Brexit will happen one way or another, but we're who we are.
Sarah, what would you say to that?
I wouldn't share the positivity that Georgina has, but I'm massively impressed by it. I agree totally. Northern Ireland's a fantastic place. Despite all its troubles, the vast majority of people on the streets aren't what are portrayed in the news and on the media. Good news doesn't sell, which is something that Georgina and I have spoken about today. But there are so many positives about Northern Ireland, and I mean, obviously I have suffered the most negative consequence of what happens in Northern Ireland. I've lost the woman I loved, and we've lost an amazing person in Lyra. But you know, she loved Northern Ireland, and she saw a future, and she wanted to see the best possible future. And that's just, you know, that's something that's going to, it's, as Georgina says, whatever happens is going to happen. It's how we come out the other end of it.
And how do you feel at the moment? I mean, around this sort of 50-year anniversary of the Battle of the Bogside and the way it's being portrayed on all sides?
I feel that it's again with the extremist language. There's a lot of this kind of blitz spirit that we're hearing about, and it's the same with a lot of people who are portraying the Battle of the Bogside in sort of glorious terms. It was an awful period of time where, you know, it's a wonder that lives weren't lost. It led to so much more conflict down the line. So glorifying it and making it seem to the young people who don't see a future and don't have any positivity in their lives, making it out to be positive, to me, really isn't the best use of media time.
And do you have an answer as to how you avoid history repeating itself?
For me personally, I really think that the best thing that we can do as a society is to be more integrated with our neighbours. I know that, and since I've grown up and I have opened myself out more, because we are quite a divided society, I've got friends from all backgrounds, and I am open to all types of culture, and I think it's great to see it celebrated here in the right ways. So for me, it's integration. It's a big thing.
Thank you all very much indeed for joining us tonight. Fascinating discussion.